Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the weight of tomorrow's uncertainties? In the midst of life's challenges, it's natural to feel burdened and uncertain about the future. But in these moments, we are reminded of a profound truth: God holds tomorrow in His hands. He invites us to cast our burdens upon Him, for He cares for us deeply. In the hustle of our daily lives, the weight of tomorrow often looms large. We carry the burdens of our responsibilities, worries about the future, and fears of the unknown. These burdens can weigh heavy on our hearts and minds, causing us to feel overwhelmed and anxious. However, as we turn to God, we find solace in His comforting embrace. He understands our struggles and invites us to lay our burdens at His feet. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This promise reminds us that we do not have to carry the weight of tomorrow alone. As we acknowledge the burdens we carry, we are reminded of our need for God's strength and guidance. We learn to trust in His plan for our lives, knowing that He holds tomorrow in His hands. By surrendering our fears and anxieties to Him, we find peace in His presence and strength to face whatever tomorrow may bring. In the act of surrender, we find a profound sense of peace. It is the recognition that we are not in control and the willingness to release our grip on the outcomes we desire. When we surrender to God, we acknowledge His sovereignty and trust in His divine plan for our lives. Surrendering to God is not a sign of weakness, but rather a display of faith and trust in His goodness. It is an act of humility, recognizing that we are finite beings in need of His infinite wisdom and guidance. As we surrender our will to His, we find a peace that surpasses all understanding. In surrender, we let go of the burdens that weigh us down and open ourselves up to receive the peace that God offers. It is a process of relinquishing control and allowing God to work in and through us. As we surrender to God, we are reminded of His unfailing love and faithfulness. We find peace in knowing that He is with us every step of the way, guiding us and comforting us in times of need. Trusting in God's providence is about acknowledging His perfect plan for our lives. It requires us to surrender our desires and ambitions to His will, believing that He knows what is best for us. This trust is not blind faith, but a deep-seated confidence in God's goodness and wisdom. When we trust in God's providence, we release the need to control every aspect of our lives. We understand that even in the midst of uncertainty, God is working all things together for our good. This trust allows us to let go of anxiety and fear, knowing that God is in control. Trusting in God's providence also means accepting that His timing is perfect. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we trust that God's timing is always right. This trust gives us hope and peace, even in the face of adversity. Ultimately, trusting in God's providence is a journey of faith. It requires us to let go of our need for control and place our trust fully in God's hands. As we do so, we find peace in knowing that God's plan for us is always good and that He is leading us toward a future filled with hope. As we walk in faith, we experience a deepening of our relationship with God. We learn to rely on Him more fully and to trust in His plan for our lives. And as we walk in faith, we are reminded that God is always with us, guiding us every step of the way. In times of struggle and uncertainty, God is our source of strength. He is the rock on which we can lean, the fortress that protects us from life's storms. When we feel weak and weary, God offers us His strength, renewing us with His power and grace. God's strength is not just a temporary fix, it is a lasting and sustainable source of support. When we tap into God's strength, we find the courage to face our challenges head-on. We are able to persevere through difficult times, knowing that God is by our side, guiding us and giving us the strength we need. God's strength is also a source of comfort and peace. In the midst of life's trials, we can find solace in knowing that God is in control. His strength reminds us that we are not alone, that He is always with us, ready to uphold us with His mighty hand. As we draw from God's strength, we are reminded of His love for us. We are reminded that we are His children and that He cares for us deeply. And in this knowledge, we find the courage to face each day, knowing that God's strength is more than enough for whatever lies ahead. Living in the present is a practice of mindfulness and gratitude. It is about being fully engaged in the here and now, rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. When we live in the present, we are able to appreciate the beauty and blessings that surround us each day. Living in the present requires us to let go of regrets and resentments from the past. It means accepting what has happened and finding peace in the present moment. Similarly, living in the present means letting go of anxieties and fears about the future. Instead of worrying about what might happen, we trust in God's plan and focus on what we can do today. Living in the present also allows us to experience life more fully. When we are fully present, we are able to savor the simple pleasures of life, a beautiful sunset, a warm embrace, a kind word. We are more attentive to the needs of others and more appreciative of the blessings in our own lives. Ultimately, living in the present is a choice we make each day. It is a choice to be mindful, grateful, and fully engaged in the life that God has given us. And in making that choice, we find joy, peace, and contentment in the present moment. Sharing God's love is a fundamental aspect of the Christian faith. It is about extending the same love and compassion that God has shown us to others. When we share God's love, we reflect His character and bring glory to His name. Sharing God's love begins with recognizing the inherent value and dignity of every person. It is about seeing others through God's eyes, as beloved children who are worthy of love and respect. This mindset transforms how we interact with others, leading us to treat them with kindness, empathy, and compassion. Sharing God's love also involves practical acts of service and generosity. It is about meeting the needs of others, both spiritually and materially, as we are able. Whether it is offering a listening ear, providing a meal, or lending a helping hand, every act of love is a reflection of God's love for us. When we share God's love, we become instruments of His grace and mercy in the world. We become channels through which His love flows to others, bringing light and hope into their lives. And as we share God's love, we experience the joy and fulfillment that comes from serving others and fulfilling our purpose as His children. Resting in God's grace is a peaceful surrender to His unmerited favor and love. It is the understanding that we do not need to earn God's love or approval, for it is freely given to us. When we rest in God's grace, we find freedom from striving and performing to earn His love, and instead, we embrace the truth that we are deeply loved and accepted just as we are. Resting in God's grace is also about finding refuge in His unfailing love during times of trials and tribulations. It is the assurance that God's grace is sufficient to sustain us through every difficulty and challenge we face. In our moments of weakness, God's grace strengthens us, and in our moments of failure, His grace forgives us. Moreover, resting in God's grace is a source of comfort and peace. It reminds us that we are not defined by our mistakes or shortcomings, but by God's love and grace. It allows us to let go of guilt and shame, knowing that we are forgiven and cherished by our Heavenly Father. Ultimately, resting in God's grace is a daily choice to trust in His love and goodness. It is a decision to live in the freedom and joy that comes from knowing that we are unconditionally loved and accepted by God. Hope for tomorrow is a powerful anchor for our souls. It is the unwavering belief that no matter what challenges we face today, a brighter future awaits us. This hope is not based on wishful thinking, but on the promises of God, who holds tomorrow in his hands. Hope for tomorrow is rooted in the faithfulness of God. Throughout history, God has proven himself to be faithful and true to his promises. He has guided his people through the darkest of times and has always been a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. This gives us confidence that he will continue to be with us, no matter what tomorrow may bring. Hope for tomorrow also gives us strength and courage to face the uncertainties of life. When we have hope, we are able to persevere through difficult times, knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. This hope is not based on our own abilities or circumstances, but on the unchanging nature of God, who is our rock and our refuge. As we hold on to hope for tomorrow, we are reminded that our story is not yet finished. God is still at work in our lives, and he has a plan and a purpose for each of us. This hope fills us with anticipation and excitement for the future, knowing that God has great things in store for us.